Your Honor, please let the record show that I love the Muppets. I'm stoked they're having a bit of a comeback because puppetry, practical effects, and the Muppets as a whole have had a rough couple of decades. Which is a huge shame because I think it's one of the most interesting mediums to watch. I love all the Muppets. I love the Muppet Show, I love the Muppet Show, I love the Muppets, and I even like the Muppets. But then I started thinking, has a Muppet ever killed somebody? Now, we all know that the Muppets are capable of committing crimes. We've seen them do it before. They pretty famously kidnapped Jack Black by rationalizing that a celebrity is not a people. So if they're able to justify things like that, is a Muppet killing someone really out of the question? To fully understand this concept, we need to turn to page 120 of the Sesame Street dictionary. This is where we find all our K words because K is the letter of the day. Kill. When you kill something, you make it die. The little tailor killed 7 flies with a fly swatter. Wow, I can kill 7 in one blow. What a monster. So now I'm curious. I want to try work out which Henson Company puppet is responsible for the most deaths. So that means for this video, we're not just going to be looking at the Muppets. The term Muppet was coined by Jim Henson in order to distinguish his act from other puppeteers. It's the combination of marionette and puppet. Some people will argue that only puppets that are part of the Muppets are counted as Muppets. Others would put Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock characters under the same banner. But it's always puppets made by the Henson Company. Kermit the Frog, Muppet. Mondigliana from the Ferals, puppet. And icon. I want to see which character on the Muppets wiki has the highest amount of kills. As a caveat, I do want to say that I'm not going to include real people on the list. I want to make a video about puppets, alright? I don't want to look at history today. I'm not out here trying to solve any cases. On the positive side, none of these people even come close to the top 3. The top 3 are on another level that I didn't expect when I started this video. Right now, all you need to know that the characters from Happy Time Murders are not on the website. They do not have their own page. So thankfully, I did not have to watch that movie. Maybe one day, not today. What the wiki does have, surprisingly, is an entire page dedicated to characters that have died. Unfortunately for my purposes of the video today, it wasn't as helpful as I thought it was going to be, but it was genuinely a really good place to start. It's pretty cohesive. It's also where I saw the dictionary thing. Muppets wiki, you do good work. Now, Muppets lore can get a little confusing. There's several levels to Muppets canon. In essence, they're treated as actors. Sometimes they're playing characters like in Christmas Carol or Treasure Island. Sometimes they're playing completely fictionalized versions of themselves like in Great Muppet Caper. Sometimes we watch the Muppets watch fictionalized versions of themselves like in the Muppet movie. Sometimes they're just themselves putting on a show in a world where not necessarily every Muppet works for the Muppets, like in the Muppet Show. The audience is all Muppets. And finally, once you start wrapping your head around this, they throw Muppets babies into the mix, and I just don't know where that fits in. Or pops out of a snail in The Masked Singer. What do I do with that? So with the Muppets specifically, we are going to be looking at confirmed kills that happen within Muppets canon, or as close as we can get to that. So we don't need to worry about a bunch of them being ghosts in Haunted Mansion or getting shot in Treasure Island or something like that, because that is the Muppets playing a character. Let's start off with Scooter. Has Scooter killed anyone? No, are you crazy? He's a Muppet. What about New Zealand? Is there a killer behind those eyes? You're just being silly. He throws a fish. A fish never hurt nobody. That's allowed. I think that's legal. What about Swedish Chef? Yeah, I think we're onto something there. I watched as much Swedish Chef content as I could possibly handle and went back into the databanks of my brain. But from what I'm able to tell, at worst, he's an attempted murderer, and that's essentially innocent. But even to label this guy as an attempted murderer, we need to take a little dive into the concept of Muppet consciousness. Before we continue with the video, I'd like to quickly thank today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. Being someone who watches a lot of movies, having a VPN is almost essential for me. Just the other day, I wanted to watch The Howling Reborn, but I quickly found out that it's almost impossible to watch in Australia, unless you're a crazy person who owns it on DVD. But that's where CyberGhost VPN came in handy. With CyberGhost, you're able to connect to servers in over 100 different countries, which allows you access to 40 streaming catalogs from around the world, including Netflix, Disney, HBO, and many more. I was able to connect in seconds, and suddenly the movie was available on Tubi, where before, it was not available to me. But a VPN's not just about unlocking content. When you browse the internet, especially on public Wi-Fi, your data and activity can be tracked. CyberGhost encrypts your traffic and hides your IP address, keeping your information safe. They also have a strict no-logs policy, meaning they do not track what you do online. You can keep your online activity completely private. One subscription works with Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and more, and you can protect up to 7 devices at the same time, which is great if you want to share it with your family or friends. CyberGhost is trusted by over 38 million people worldwide and has over 20,000 excellent reviews on Trustpilot. So clearly, it's doing something right. If you want to try it yourself, use my link in the description for the best deal, plus get a 45-day money-back guarantee. So really, there's no risk. Thanks again to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this video. Obviously, several of the Muppets are animals. They can communicate and they can run a television show. There are some Muppet animals that do just seem to be animals, albeit at a slightly higher rate of intelligence, but they cannot communicate in a language that we understand. And then there's also vegetables that sometimes sing and sometimes talk. The Swedish chef, all these categories to a degree are fair game, although typically he's going more for the second two categories, non-verbal animals and singing vegetables. And for the most part, he is unsuccessful. It's a Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner kind of situation. They're always getting the better of him. Most of the time, because there's few situations where we do get to see him succeed. But when he does succeed, the characters don't die. They are just changed. And what is life if not to change? For example, here he is shooting two pumpkins with a bazooka, turning them into pies. They're still alive, but they're different. But it's not just background characters like these that Swedish chef tries to cook. He's gone after some real A-listers too. The most notable example of this is when he tried to turn Big Bird, the heart and soul of Sesame Street, into Christmas dinner. He was fully preparing to serve the big guy to all his friends. That was until Big Bird showed him a little bit of kindness, which we all know goes a long way. So what I've been able to see from Swedish chef, the confirmed kills is actually 0. But I wouldn't be surprised if he had. To be honest, I don't think he's a bad guy. I just don't think he's got any thoughts. All he is a chef. He wants to cook food and he wants people to eat. And he's not an outlier character here, because Muppet cannibalism is absolutely rampant. Enough for a completely separate page on the Muppets wiki. Muppets eating other Muppets. It happens all the time. Supposedly, if they didn't know how to end a sketch, they would just have a Muppet eat another Muppet. There's several characters whose whole deal is eating other Muppets whole. Such characters include Gorgon Heap, Behemoth, Mean Mama, and Big Mean Carl. Now, notably, just because a Muppet gets eaten doesn't mean that it dies. That's why there's separate pages on the wiki. In fact, majority of the time when you see a Muppet eat another Muppet, it's completely fine. It's all part of the show. Miss Piggy gets eaten all the time, and she's completely fine. I swear, Miss Piggy's the same pig that she's always been. So I'm only really counting it as a death if the character never shows up again. So Behemoth is in the clear. To be honest, I think they gotta use this guy more. He's got a good design. Gorgon Heap, from what I've been able to see, is also seemingly innocent. Mean Mama has maybe one instance of killing someone, but it's hard to say, because the person in question was John Cleese's agent. After this episode of The Muppet Show, John Cleese did work again, so he probably still had an agent. I feel like if his last agent was eaten by a Muppet, he'd struggle to get a new one. And look, everyone seems to be on pretty decent terms with Mean Mama. The only one that I can maybe safely confirm that has actually eaten someone is Big Mean Carl. On Muppets Tonight, there was a recurring segment called Swift Wits, hosted by Snooki Blyer, where Muppets could compete to win a small, cute animal like a little rabbit or a dog. However, if they got a question wrong, Big Mean Carl would eat the animal. Now, obviously, we could assume that this is going to be like every other Muppet segment, where eating another Muppet is non-fatal. But Snooki Blyer repeatedly states things that would imply the contrary. For example, he once said, "There won't be a next time." Now look, when Big Mean Carl eats a rabbit, who are we to judge? People be eating rabbits. But you know who else is a rabbit? Beloved character Bean Bunny. If Big Mean Carl ate Bean Bunny and Bean Bunny never came back, there would be riots in the street. But this could be one of those situations where the rabbit here is of a lower consciousness level to Bean Bunny. Except we know specifically that that's not the case. Snooki says that this rabbit, Hopper, dreams of meeting his relatives overseas. This was a rabbit with hopes and dreams. And Big Mean Carl took those away. Big Mean Carl also ate the only guy who ever won the competition. He was just trying to save the dog that he rightfully won. Now, for the sake of candidness, some of the animals that Big Mean Carl eats may or may not show up again. For example, a mole similar to the one that Big Mean Carl eats shows up in an episode of Muppets Now. But I think more likely this is just a generic mole design. A couple of moles that look identical have shown up in the Muppets over time. So I'm counting this as though Carl literally did eat these guys. He's mean, he's a monster, and he's messed up. So let's see how Big Mean Carl compares to the other hungry cannibal I'm talking about today. Polyphemus from Greek mythology. Listed as Cyclops in the Muppets wiki, Polyphemus appeared in the 1997 TV miniseries adaptation of The Odyssey, which I'll be releasing a video on in like a month or two. So if you like the sound of that, please subscribe. I'd appreciate that. That's nice. But Todd, Polyphemus is not a Muppet. I know. I thought we covered that already. The Henson company worked on the full body version of the character, and that's why he's on the Muppets wiki. They also worked on Skilla, who does not have a page on the Muppets wiki, so I will not be talking about how many they killed. Odysseus and the gang stumble into the big guy's lair where they start having a little party. Polyphemus catches them in the act, and he's not too stoked about this, so he locks them in and he starts eating them. But even the great son of Poseidon doesn't match up to Big Mean Carl, as he only ends up eating 2 of Odysseus's gang, compared to Big Mean Carl, who ate 6 on Swift Wits. That's why in Muppets Most Wanted we can see that Carl is locked in the gulag, because that's where he belongs, in prison for life. Speaking of the Gulag, it's worth noting that we do actually know the identity of one of the Muppets' world's most dangerous. The world's most dangerous frog, Constantine. In regards to his specific crimes, he's the #1 thief in the world. Ricky Gervais is #2. But thievery is not a dangerous crime. To be known as the world's most dangerous something, you must have done something pretty big and pretty bad. The world's most dangerous baker isn't someone who's really good at baking, but there's no physical evidence, at least in the movie, that Constantine has ever killed someone. In his breakout scene at the beginning of the film, we even see that he's doing non-lethal takedowns. When he's presented with the opportunity to use a weapon, he doesn't take it. He just disarms him. And while he blows up the prison, we see later on that everyone inside seems to be fine. If anyone was hurt, they don't say so. No one seems to harbor a grudge against him. Thankfully, we can work out just how dangerous of a frog Constantine actually is by comparing him to every other frog in the world. Statistics! There's many ways to measure how dangerous something actually is. The word dangerous means able or likely to cause harm or injury. So Constantine is the frog most likely or able to cause harm or injury. But let's look at frogs by species. The golden poison frog is not only known to be the most poisonous frog in the world, but one of, if not the most poisonous animal on Earth. Through their skin, they secrete a toxin able to kill 10 to 20 adults. So even touching one is dangerous. So Constantine, to hold his title, must have caused more harm or injury than any individual of the golden poison frog species. Well, there has not been a single reported death from the golden poison frog. Maybe there's been some off the books, but there's no official death. So Constantine would be considered the world's most dangerous frog because he punches the guy really hard. The golden poison frog doesn't go looking for a fight, while Constantine knows kung fu and is therefore more dangerous. It's worth noting that the local indigenous people of where the golden poison frog is found use the toxins in hunting. Some may argue that this makes the frog more dangerous. I disagree. If someone ripped off my arm and beat another guy to death with it, I'm not dangerous. I'm probably dead. There's a topic I can no longer dance around regarding a certain other frog. I'm sure many of the people watching this video know what I'm talking about and have just been waiting for me to say it. Kermit the Frog's perceived involvement with 9/11. I want to be clear, I did not think of this. This is like early internet theory stuff. Lots of people have talked about this, and I will be going full defense for Kermit. I will be defending my client here. Anyone even suggesting that he had anything to do with it, it's beyond ridiculous. Let's get into it. The 2002 made-for-TV movie, It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, Kermit wishes that he'd never been born to an angel named Daniel, who ends up showing him a dark, Kermitless reality. Gonzo is homeless. Honeydew has a soul patch. Miss Piggy is a cat lady. The Electric Mayhem are Irish. And Rizzo is forced to hang out with Joe Rogan. It's not all bad, though. Beaker is jacked, and Scooter is weirdly liberated. Go, Scooter, go. More power to you. But also in this reality, we see that the Twin Towers still stand. And obviously, in the mainline reality, they do not. Now, supposedly this was filmed after the September 11 attacks, but the mural they made for filming was already finished, which leaves a pretty grim implication that somehow Kermit's existence is tied to September 11. But let's dissect this. Realistically, at the very worst here, Kermit's only crime is existing. The butterfly effect works in insane ways, and that goes 100,000-fold for prominent international celebrities. So many people in your life you meet by chance. You might have missed out meeting the love of your life because they spent 20 extra minutes watching Muppets Now. If Kermit's crime is existing, then we should all be in prison. Never truly be able to measure how many lives our existence has saved or taken. Kermit is not responsible. It's also not canon. It's not canon, I don't think. Whoopi Goldberg is God, and she also shows up as Whoopi Goldberg in a different thing. So I don't think it can be canon. How many deaths for Kermit? Zero. We got a couple of other characters we need to cover in this video before the numbers really escalate. Things are gonna get crazy pretty fast. But before that, it's time to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. Jim Henson's Creature Shop worked on the animatronics for both Five Nights at Freddy's and Five Nights at Freddy's 2, meaning that Freddy Fazbear has a page on the Muppets wiki. These are the only actual horror characters that I'm talking about here today, which feels kinda crazy. At the start of this video, I didn't think I'd have to research Five Nights at Freddy's lore, but here we are. As a collective, the main group of animatronics kills 7 people in the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie. It's worth noting that William Afton does not have a page on the Muppets wiki, so no one he kills counts. The alternate animatronics that show up in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 actually share pages with their original counterparts on the wiki, so I wasn't exactly sure how to count their kills. I feel like because they don't have their own page, with the rules I set up with this video, they shouldn't count. In fact, none of the animatronics from Five Nights at Freddy's 2 have their own pages yet, so the marionette and stuff, they don't really count either. But regardless, somehow, no single animatronic has more kills than Big Mean Carl. To be honest, they're not even really close. You may have noticed a certain glaring omission while watching this video. Not a single Sesame Street character has been mentioned so far. That's because most of them have not killed anybody, except for one. I'm of course talking about International Super Spy James Bond, who once appeared as a Muppet as he had to visit Dr. No in order to find out why he was struggling to read words. Here's why I'm kind of counting it. James Bond has been played by various actors over the years. Who's to say that this Muppet isn't one of them? What makes this Muppet any less valid than Daniel Craig? People said blonde Bond, you couldn't do that, but now they love him. I'm saying Muppet Bond counts. So with 352 kills across 22 movies, so far, James Bond from Sesame Street is the #1 killer. Now, none of these kills happened on Sesame Street. They all took place on various other different streets. So you can decide the validity of this in your mind. Reality is exactly what you choose it to be, and your beliefs are important. Now, I do want to briefly bring up a bit of a blind spot for me, and that's the TV show Farscape. I apologize, I'm yet to watch it. I'm sure there'd be a bunch of characters from that show that would fit in this video somewhere, but I didn't want to look into it too hard because I do want to watch it eventually, especially considering that it was filmed here in Sydney. It was a show produced by the Henson company that ran for 4 seasons and a movie, but to be honest, I'd be surprised if any of them came near the top 3. Numbers that the following have racked up are almost unfathomable. We're talking somewhere between the hundreds of thousands to the billions. One of them, maybe even trillions. Let's start with the smaller scale of the 3. The Skeksis, from the 1982 dark fantasy movie The Dark Crystal, who also appeared in the 2019 TV series The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. I think one of the greatest crimes in TV history was the cancellation of this show. I simply do not understand it. They already made all the puppets. Surely that's the expensive part. It feels like the next season would have been cheap as chips. It annoys me because I feel like this show could have been brought up in the same breath as Game of Thrones. That ended disappointingly. It felt like there was an opportunity there for this show to kind of gather that audience, because it's got a similar feeling to it. You don't pick up a cult classic from 1982 and expect it to do well instantly. The whole point of a cult classic is that there's so much longevity to it rather than instant gratification. So I don't know, just bring it back. I love that show. Because the show was cancelled, we don't quite have all the information we need. We gotta piece some things together here. The original movie shows 2 gelflings attempt to restore balance to the world. They can only do by repairing a giant magical crystal, which is currently under the control of a cabal of evil Skeksis. The Skeksis are cruel, materialistic, and the self-proclaimed rulers over the domain of Thra. They've corrupted the once pure crystal of truth. 1,000 Shrine prior to the events of the film, there were 18 Skeksis, but by the time the film starts, there's only 10. The 2 gelflings that go on this adventure are seemingly the last 2 gelflings. Somewhere between the prequel series and the original movie, every other gelfling has died. The Skeksis have driven them to extinction. The Age of Resistance seemingly did not go well. You kind of see the beginnings of this in the series. The collapse of gelfling society and culture as they realized that the Skeksis were not the rulers that they thought. Interestingly, you also get to see the Skeksi side of things. What little morals they have slowly erode over the course of the series. Early on, you kind of see little glimmers of something there. There's many different ways that their materialistic nature is represented, and it's not always just in the form of cruelty. For the most part, it's a phenomenal and surprisingly nuanced show. It's a whole video in itself. Maybe one day. I'm sure if the show continued, we'd have a bit more information, but for now, we just have to assume that every gelfling is dead. There were 7 gelfling clans of undeterminate size. I only found one source that would kind of say how many gelflings there were, and it's not great. They say that the Groton clan was particularly small, consisting of only a couple of dozen, which after watching the show again, I don't think can possibly be true. It looks like there's a lot more Grotons here. The implication of the show as a whole is that the gelfling is probably Thra's most dominant species, given their close relationship with the Skeksis. So we can kind of assume that the gelflings are in the hundreds of thousands to the millions. But the Skeksis didn't just do one genocide, they've done at least 3. Before the TV show, the Skeksis wiped out a species called the Grunak, which were a technologically advanced species. You don't get to see much of them in the show, there's only 2, and they have their mouths sewn shut, so we don't know much about them other than that they're good with machines. Skeksis also work to destroy the Aratham and the Macrak. Kind of assume that between the show and the movie, most of the Aratham are wiped out due to events we can kind of piece together. Meanwhile, the Macrak, who are only in the comics, are probably fine. They were guided through the fields of fire by Railnip. Who's Railnip? Don't worry about it. It's also worth noting that during the events of the film, the podling species is not looking so good either. They definitely still have society, but it looks like they're on track to not. I think we can kind of safely say that the Skeksis have killed millions. With Skekso, the Emperor, probably having the most blood on his hands. With Skekmal, the Hunter, probably having the most literal blood on his hands. So what's worse than decimating an entire species? Well, blowing up a planet. Welcome to Bratz of the Lost Nebula, short-lived kids science fiction TV series made by the Henson Company for Canadian TV. And these are not the brats with a passion for fashion. These brats have a passion for war. 5 orphans band together after they escape their individual war-torn planets, and they work together to defeat the shock while also attempting to find their parents, who are maybe alive somewhere out there in the galaxy. The group flies around on a living planet that is also a spaceship that the goth girl can talk to telepathically. The shock of these giant robot dudes that are commanded by these mysterious entities called the hosts. But the main recurring villain is this guy named Hexter Vigar. Hexter Vigar flies around on a biomechanical warship and commands the largest shock army in the galaxy. In the opening of the show, we see him blow up a planet that is home to 2 of the main characters. But he can only blow up a planet when a giant eye is watching. That's a recurring thing in the show, is that he has to wait for this mysterious eye, and he doesn't know why. He just knows that the eye has to watch. His best friend is a weird little worm guy that he uses as a stress toy, and he has a terrifying Cenobite-looking doctor called Dr. Fabu. This show is insane. I feel like if they pitched this at a slightly older audience like they did with Dark Crystal, this show would have had more of a chance. Because after 3 episodes, they stopped airing it on TV. The show would have been lost forever if they didn't upload it online years later. Yeah, I get it. Some of these characters are a bit too hard to stomach for a morning TV kids block. There's a lot of body horror going on in this show. Hexter is blowing up planets on the daily. The way he talks about it is just like another day's work. So before the brats came into the picture, he's killing billions on the reg. And even then, some episodes, he gets the planet anyway. Now, interestingly, this character has been sculpted by the hosts into a kind of killing machine. He has no memories of his past from before the war. So the show as a whole, for both the villain and the main characters, is kind of about how war strips away childhood. The goth alien girl has these wings, right? And in episode 4, during an attack, her wings are irreparably damaged. She runs away and then voluntarily enslaves herself in order to spare herself from her own emotions. And then by the end of the episode, she comes to terms with things and starts using a jetpack. Her wings never come back. And that's episode 4. So hearing me talk about this show, you must think it's quite serious, but it's not. It's hard to watch. It's very juvenile, so you're constantly getting just tonal whiplash. It's like the themes of Avatar: The Last Airbender mixed in with the most 90s version of the Ninja Turtles. Now, at the end of the show, we find out what the giant eye actually is. It's a giant entity that has been strapped into a spaceship, and they force it to watch them blowing up planets in order to make it feel grief. And it's this grief that is converted into energy that the hosts eat. Essentially, Vigar killed billions or trillions to make a big eye sad. The show's hectic, man. They did a Clockwork Orange to an Eldritch Being. The last character has much more personal stakes. Unlike Vigar, who was groomed and brainwashed to wipe out planets, the next guy wiped out his own. He killed every person that he'd ever known or loved by accident. I'm talking about Earl from the family sitcom Dinosaurs. I have no idea how happy this makes me. I've wanted to make a video about dinosaurs since I started the channel. I just could never think of a title. Dinosaurs came out when family sitcoms were at an all-time peak. One of the biggest shows were Family Matters, Married with Children, and unfortunately The Cosby Show, which was the #1 show on television for 5 years straight. Due to the success of these TV shows and the Muppets in the 70s, Alf was born. Alf was an alien who wanted to eat cats and lived with a regular human family. And it kind of proved that audiences were ready for something a little bit strange. But what was directly cited as a reason for the TV show Dinosaurs to be made was actually The Simpsons. Nothing like The Simpsons had been done before. At the time, it was truly unique, which made people more comfortable with greenlighting something as weird as dinosaurs. In essence, it was your regular family sitcom. You've got Earl, the overweight dim-witted father with a menial job. You got the homemaker Fran, Robbie, the intelligent older son, Charlene, the materialistic daughter. The real draw of the show was Baby, the extremely talkable and durable Baby. Everybody loved Baby. And Baby was voiced by Elmo. Earl had some pretty slow friends from work and an insanely rich and cruel boss. So other than some personality traits with the kids, the whole show was kind of like The Simpsons, but with a Flintstones twist. Now, you might look at this ridiculous show and these extravagant dinosaur costumes and assume that this was for children. That wasn't quite the case. This was such a popular misconception that the show had not 1, but 2 characters that were made to make fun of Barney the dinosaur. Barney came to television just 1 year after Dinosaurs aired. I'm not certain that Barney ripped this show off, but Earl certainly seems to think so. Now, just because the show took place in prehistoric times does not mean that it wasn't topical. In fact, it was at the forefront of culture. Here's an excerpt of some of the issues that it covers from the Wikipedia article. Environmentalism, endangered species, women's rights, harassment, LGBT rights, objectification of women, censorship, civil rights, body image, steroid use, solutions to jerking it, drug abuse, racism, peer pressure, rights of indigenous people, corporate crime, government interference in parenting, and pacifism. There's also episodes about war, consumerism, religion, whatever you can think of, they made an episode on it. Running for 4 seasons with 65 episodes, audiences learned to love these characters. Over the course of the show, you could see characters evolve over time. So I can only imagine how shocked audiences were when they wiped out the entire cast in the final episode. Now, I already know someone's gonna comment, of course they all died, they're dinosaurs. That's what they famously did. Well, the dinosaurs were around for more than 150 million years. Modern humans have only been around for 300,000. The dinosaurs have done more living than we have. Alright? But in the show Dinosaurs, they're not wiped out by a meteor or something like that. No, they were wiped out by Earl. Can you imagine if The Simpsons ended with Homer causing a meltdown in the nuclear power plant and it killed everyone in the town? That's kind of what happens in Dinosaurs. So species called bunch beetles were wiped out after a company called We Say So put a wax fruit factory on their breeding grounds. And because of that, there's a domino effect. A fast-growing poppy plant that the bugs normally eat is growing out of control. Now, the company that owns this fruit factory is the same one that Earl works for. And the plant's taken over. Well, that's a PR disaster. It's hurting the profit margins. So Earl's put in charge of a committee to find a solution. And he comes up with one. Poison the plants. Cover the entire planet in a plant-killing poison. They do this and the plants die off. But unfortunately, as a side effect, the plants die off. All thanks to Earl. Now, I think we can all agree that the planet at this point is kind of screwed. Everyone's gonna starve in the coming weeks. So when Earl's boss nukes every volcano around the globe and attempts to make clouds to make it rain, it's just icing on the cake at that point. The resulting calamity blots out the sun, bringing about an ice age that is set to last tens of thousands of years. As the family gathers around the TV one last time, Earl has to explain to his kids that he screwed up the world. And although things look really bad, maybe things will turn out okay. The dinosaurs have been around for 150 million years. It's not like they're just gonna disappear. The show ends with news reporter Howard Handupney signing off for one final time as all of the dinosaurs freeze to death. Absolutely unhinged. It's a very clear environmental message that they were trying to do with the end of the show. Dinosaurs had the subtlety of a dinosaur. And with the ending of this show, they were very much trying to say that, in a way, we're all Earl. We all treat nature poorly for perceived progress where it's not always needed. Things work fine in balance. We don't need wax fruit. We can assume the dinosaur population was around about the same as our world in the 90s, considering they had the same technology and the same societal issues. So around 5.7 billion people were killed by Earl, not including animals. This would presumably put him in second place next to Vigar. But unlike Hexstar, who never had to look anyone he killed in the eye, Earl had to watch his family freeze around him due to his negligence. This video was grim. In conclusion, the Muppet with the most kills is Big Mean Carl. Have I missed something? Almost definitely. If I have, please let me know in the comments. I love watching or learning about a new thing. At this point in the video, I'm sure you're able to tell that I really just wanted to talk about all these puppet shows that I find interesting. And thanks again to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this video. If you want to stay protected and get access to content from around the world, use my link in the description to get a great deal. But thanks for watching. I hope you found it interesting too. If there was anything here that you were particularly intrigued by, please let me know. I'd be keen to expand on some of these in a later video, as long as there's enough interest, which there might not be, and that's okay. If you like this video, maybe check out this one. It's probably about Garfield. Yep, all right. And then this one it's a horror movie, but they were like doing it like Wicked. They thought, Wicked's popular right now. Let's make it like a horror movie kind of thing. Yeah. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you in the next one.